Hello, Tony.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right, great to have you here. When it comes to violent attacks happening in states like Borno and so many other states in Nigeria, one can't help but ask, will violent attacks and killings in communities ever come to an end?
That's a big question. It's a big question because we're talking of a campaign that is running to almost uh, getting close to 2 decades now, as it were, well above a decade. And the rhetorics are still the same thing, especially from the political class. If you ask me that question, I think my first response would naturally be, I have not actually have that conviction as it were now. But maybe the recent a different approach with respect to the creation of state police, the present presence of the American strategic group, it were to the extent of trying to render technical assistance, would go a long way. Maybe the government would have to look at the campaign against insurgency in the country as a whole from a different strategic approach. The approach that is being executed now is a defective approach. With due respect, and not without, and I'm not saying that it has not yielded any result, except for the fact that since the killing is unabated, since the killing is still continuing, since the terrorists have the bravado to also hit hard targets, I think it is naturally sensible for government to reappraise its strategy, reshuffle when it is necessary, especially the security formation should think about major reshuffling. I should think about different approach. They should also think about deliberate campaign to recover all ungoverned spaces. We have too many ungoverned spaces in Nigeria, in the Borno, in the Niger State, and many of ungoverned spaces that have given the terrorists the bravado to continue their escapade because they believe that they are winning, more especially because they are in control of these ungoverned spaces all over the country, especially in the northern part of the country. And of course, the policy of having repentant terrorists, repentant Boko Haram and the like, I don't think it makes any strategic sense. Rather, it emboldens, it encourages, it's more of an advantage to the terrorists than to the government. So maybe the government want to look at that and absolutely scrap the policy and principle of rehabilitating and re-entrenching the so-called repentant Boko Haram back into the society. These are killers. These are people that don't have heart. These are people that are, cruel at its highest order. So I don't think it makes any sense, because what you do is to also encourage their sponsors to give them the assurance that even if they arrest you, we'll find a way to bring you back under the instrumentality of repentant Boko Haram and whatever. Now, of course, another thing is to also look at our judicial system. To what extent has the judiciary been able to come all out, especially with the speed of light when it comes to the prosecution of terrorists in accordance with the Terrorism Prevention Act. So the policing system itself has a lot of questions, especially with respect to holistic implementation of the campaign against terrorism. The manpower is relatively very, very low. The government encouragement of the policing system is also very weak, especially with respect to funding, financing, and equipping them. So if you look at it from this whole angle, I think that the government seems to have a lot to do. I'm looking forward to a situation where the campaign will be deliberate and well coordinated, talking about the geocombing of the forest. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Tony, now you've kind of delved into strategizing in things that the federal government as well as our security setups need to be looking at in order to change the situation in Nigeria. Now, let's talk about intelligence reports, because there's been a lot of discussions about depending on that. Residents often will claim that there were warnings before these attacks. Are intelligence reports being ignored, or is the security response in Nigeria simply too slow?
I think it's a combination of both. There are instances where intelligence are being ignored, and there are instances where you talk about slow response timing. Yes, if the community are bold enough to call upon the necessary security agency to come and respond to such attack. Now, the question will now be, who is receiving that call? Now, the person receiving that call, is he or she sympathetic to the act of terrorism? Is he a member of a sleeper cell that is working in any of the security agencies? If the answer is yes and in the affirmative, I can assure you that that distress call most likely will be buried. So that simply means that there will not be any response until the campaign against such community has been well executed. Now, if that person is not, or that officer is not a member of any sleeper cell, but does not have that capacity to order the troop, now who is going to order that troop? Now, what are the resources on ground, the logistics on ground as at that time? To what extent are they prepared? Now, these are veritable information that they will need before they even talk about moving, because you don't want to put 10 people to run into an ambushment of about 1,000 people or 300 people and all those stuff like that. So it's a combination of all. It's a combination of the fact that at times the response timing can be very slow. The topography of certain environments in the country can be very, very turbulent and very unpleasant. And of course, at times, it can just be that intelligence fell into the hands of sympathizers to the act of terrorism. But for me, it's not as if we lack intelligence, but the use of intelligence is actually the main problem. Who is going to use that intelligence? And to what extent is the person that is going to use that intelligence enthusiastic about the use of such intelligence? You look at the options. The options are, am I going to be successful in this operation? What are the odds that most likely one would face in the process of executing this operation? Now, these are all variables that come together to be able to determine the strategy that the security agencies will use in any of such distress calls. So it's a combination of all.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tony, for giving your opinions on this very important issue.